In the slides I showed you yesterday, I had some of the states. This comes from a report called Case for Inclusion that comes out once a year. And what you can see by the different colors is all the states in the country. And you're in the 10 to 19% category. And you can see what your neighbors are in and where you fit. And again, this can be useful with legislators, with your peers, to show we got a long way to go to get to the top group of states in the country in terms of employment. And it's all about policy and expectations and funding. It's not about people's capacity. We're past that, as you know. So take that with you. One more goodie for the easy handout kind of thing. Okay. So, several of you had several meetings with different folks, so to speak. Good Q&A, good representative, good senator, different styles. What'd you learn? Anybody? And do we have a handheld mic? If I can get Daryl, Linda to walk around with the mic if folks want to. What'd you get out of it?
That building relationships is important. I mean, it didn't take but, what, he was 10 minutes and we got a co-sponsor, right?
Yeah, you were fortunate in that she's who she is, but you could not ask for better. You didn't even ask her to co-sponsor. She volunteered to co-sponsor. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Okay. But they didn't make the ask, she made the offer, which I thought was fascinating. Yeah, yeah. Good, good. Others? Yes?
We will be prepared for the meeting. We learned to be prepared for the meeting because you don't know what that person's gonna say. You're well prepared. Then we had a speech wrote up, and then they came in and messed up the beginning, our intro. But as long as you're prepared, be prepared to know your information. That's what we learned.
Be prepared and get back on script. Yeah. And I saw, and she gave some feedback over here. You guys sort of wandered a bit, and she said, what's going on? Or James said, James, I think. But yeah, the reason you have that outline, not that you can't deviate a little bit, is the sequence makes sense. What's the meeting about? What are we here to talk about and why? Okay, that's the ask, and you open with it and you close with it. Whether the ask is just to support the bill, in the future I suspect you're going to be asking lots of people to be co-sponsors of the bill, which is a different ask than just vote for it when it's on the floor or something like that. And that's fine depending where you are in the legislative process. Sometimes the bill won't be yours, it'll be one that somebody else has already done, but they may still say, we need 10 more co-sponsors. So please contact your person because they sit on this committee and see if they would co-sponsor. Co-sponsorship, as you heard her say, is great. The more co-sponsors, the better, and particularly if they're on the committee or committees of jurisdiction, because that's where the first vote happens, okay? So that was good stuff. What else did you learn? Nobody?
A lot of research.
Pardon?
Research.
Research. Do your homework.
And the bill of and such, all the amendments and everything.
Yeah. And again, the status of the bill, is it in committee? Has it moved? All that kind of stuff. Again, we gave you a little of that, but probably not enough. But when you do your homework, you need to know it's been referred to the committee, but they haven't held a hearing. Or they held a hearing, but they haven't voted on it yet. All that kind of, and it's all on the website. Your legislative website, as I said yesterday, and she was explaining to a couple of tables, is really not difficult to navigate. It's quite user-friendly, and it'll give you all that information, including if there are co-sponsors, who are the co-sponsors. If your member happens to be a co-sponsor and you go meet with them, what's the first thing you're going to tell them? Thank you for being a co-sponsor, okay? And I just want to let you know that's exciting, and then you go into the spiel about why it's important to you to do that. I think I'm sorry, go ahead, Daryl. Oh, I'm sorry, Eric. I don't have my rear view mirror on.
Learning how to cooperate with the member of your organization is very important.
Say more.
And again, learn how to work together as a team.
Ah,
It's a key for your future.
working together as a team is a key for your future. Put that one down at the top of the list. Yeah. Being the Lone Ranger isn't what this is about. This is about teamwork, collaboration, statewide work, regional work, depending what you're doing. Sometimes if it's a local school board, then it's whatever the jurisdiction of the school is. If it's state legislature, it's your legislators. If it's Congress, hopefully it's you dealing with your congressional folks and people in the other 49 states on the same page, dealing with theirs, so we get a consistent message, which, let me deviate for 1 second, then we'll get the next comment. We mentioned yesterday regulations as another part of public policy that comes out of the executive branch. I continue to be distressed by the few number of people in this country who respond when the action alerts come out, like from the ARC-US or other national organizations, Autism Society, et cetera, and I'll refer to Department of Ed. Department of Education has just released a new proposed rule or proposed guidance on something, usually something to do with special education. We've analyzed it nationally, and would you please write some letters saying these are really good, or these are really good except number 7 and number 12 aren't very good, and this is the reason why, and put your personal story behind it. And they have to count everyone and score it and report out under current policy. They didn't have to do that, but when they do what's called notice of proposed rule making, there's usually anywhere from 30 to 90 days for public comment. Then they have to put all the comments together, they can collapse them, and they have to write a report saying, okay, on this section we got 480, 390 said this, whatever, and our response is we're going to keep it or we're going to amend it to say that, okay? The last time one was done on special ed, and we just have a couple of million kids in special ed in the United States, that's all. Less than 1,200 comments came in from around the United States. That's not very helpful, and I'm not beating up on you. So you got to get on the listservs in order to know this. But again, this is the federal government saying, please, we want your feedback. And it's not only for professionals, it's for anybody. And if it's an IEP thing, you probably want to know about it. And we'll talk about listservs in a little bit. But don't ever underestimate the power of your voice, your email to the feds or whatever, because now that didn't used to be the way it was. They now have to count them and issue a report when they issue the final regulation to justify what they're keeping or what they're changing. That's about as open a government as we could expect. But if we don't play by the rules on our side, they can get away with a lot of stuff. I'm sorry, go ahead. Whoops. Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, I think.
It was really nice to see in action if we researched the legislatures, the reps, the senators, and had a back history to them. We were able to quickly disarm something that would have been partisan and make it bipartisan.
Say a little more.
If doing research about what was important to those specific stakeholders
Got
who
it.
represent us in the state,
Yep.
knowing what we need to do to meet them allows us to take down barriers of what would maybe have been a no and turn it into, oh, well, maybe that could benefit me too, or it could benefit my constituents. So it creates a bipartisan issue instead of a a partisan issue that they don't want to breach.
That's elegant, yes. If you do your homework, you're going to have some insights into that member. And again, it's not about good or bad, they're all different. What do you know, and how do you modify what you say, the language you say it? I used to do this all the time in DC. I would go to a Democratic office and I would go to a Republican office. My overall message was the same, but I got pretty good at using different words in different offices that I knew would resonate with greater comfort and otherwise would be red flags. In a sense, that's what you're saying. That's beautiful. And all of you learn from that, again, the words are important. And a word that resonates with a Dem could be a red flag with an R, and conversely, the same the other way. And again, that's just how they filter those words. So fine tune it, find a different word, come at it, but you haven't changed your message, you've just changed the script a little bit. That's beautiful. Thank you. And all of you profit from that as you go forward. And we talked it yesterday, and Representative said it as well. Go to the legislative website. You can get the bio information. You can also put their name in. There's, I don't know if Legal Women Voters is active in Alabama. Most of them have good websites. They have bios on every member of the legislature. They tend to be nonpartisan. They just sort of say, here's where they were born, here's how they're married, their family status, where they went to school, college, what their profession is. So you can get a lot of information. And then you can ask around if you're not sure by somebody who's seasoned, okay, what can you tell me about this senator and their track record on disability? Because many of them have been around a while. There are people who can tell you that. Some of that may or may not be easy to find out on the website because you don't know all the different bills that were voted on or not voted on. But great, yeah, the research is really important. And it's not partisan, it's fact. This is who I'm meeting with. Whoop, fine-tune my script for them. Okay, now I'm going over here, a little different. Script A1, not A, right? Beautiful, thank you. Anybody else? Thoughts, reflections?
The way to boil that down, the way to boil that down is, just know your audience, know who you're talking to, and use that to your advantage. Because it's just smart business. Whether you're dealing with your elected official or a business associate, just know your audience, because there are certain triggers for that person. So if you can't remember all that, just remember the 3-word phrase, know your audience.
I love it. And again, if you think about that, that's common sense. How many of you, if you've been to college, know that there's certain things that you're going to say with one professor or teaching assistant that you're going to say differently or not say with the other one? We all learn that. We get the radar, we get the signals. This is called human relations, or I'm going to give you a better phrase. It's called common sense. It's called common sense, and then I'll give some of you a quote you can use from a gentleman named John McGee, who is no longer with us. Anybody know that name? No? John McGee was a PhD in Nebraska who was the first person to ever get engaged in dealing with people with really challenging behaviors, etc. John wouldn't use an aversive if you put an AK-47 to his head. He'd say, kill me first. He believed, and I want to give you a couple of teaching points here, there is no such thing, hear me, as maladaptive behavior. Get it out of your jargon. All behavior from the person engaging in it is adaptive. Behavior is a form of communication. It may be socially unacceptable or socially inappropriate. And John described and created what he called gentle teaching. But the other phrase, picking up on what Eric said, and my talking about common sense is the least commonly used of all of our senses. I want you to think about that one. Common sense, that's John McGee, I want to give credit, it's not Alan, but I was fortunate to work with him in the 80s and watch his magic about really dealing with behaviors and not, if you will, changing the behavior, but trying to find out what is going on and what is the person trying to tell me. And again, I was telling this, I think, to James the other day, or maybe Daryl, I'm not sure. He did early work in the institutions when, let's just say, healthcare and medical care left some to be desired. And there were a lot of people who were, quote, headbangers. I'm sure you've heard of that. And whether they banged their head on the wall or they were this kind of thing. And of course, that was maladaptive behavior. Guess what Dr. McGee discovered about almost all of those individuals? They had massive middle ear and inner ear infections, and the only way they could deal with the pain, because they weren't able to speak, was to hit it. It wasn't maladaptive at all. It was very adaptive, and it was probably painful for them to do that. But I share that lesson with you in terms of now this whole field still talking about maladaptive behaviors. And, oh, thank you. Okay. That's maladaptive too. Okay. No, but I just share with you the pearls of wisdom of what's going on. And always remember that behavior is a form of communication. It may not be an acceptable form, it may not be appropriate, but let's try to figure out what's the person trying to tell us. So common sense is, if you're going to meet with anybody, do a little profiling. Who are they? What's going to resonate? What's not? And then life goes forward. So thank you, Dr. Peebles. Others, thoughts, comments, reflections on the meetings, the planning, organizing? None? Okay. Most of you did a really good job of getting through your planned meeting in the 10 to 12 minutes, and I commend you for that. There are lots of people who don't get that done the first time, and I sort of have to come around and say, get back on task or whatever. So you did very well. Your outcomes were quite good. I think point well taken from our good Senator Orr. If there's a fiscal note, we need to check it out and make sure we know if there is one. Not every bill has one, and if so, how much it is, so we can answer that. That's not hard. And then the other is, if there's anybody in organized world who's for it or opposed to it, okay? And again, typically you're going to have a fact sheet on this from some organization, whether it's the council or ADAP or, you know, I don't know who else does lobbying in this state that would put that stuff out. And again, the councils can't lobby, but they can educate, they can inform, they can put out fact sheets. And sometimes councils don't quite get that. So Daryl's nodding, he knows he can do that legally, but he can't go in and lobby in favor of the bill, but he can put out a fact sheet that says this is what the bill is. You decide what you want to do as a constituent. So that's exciting to know that you can have that information, and then you can still do your own research, but be nice if somebody who's doing the policy stuff regularly, Holly does, you know, put out the fact sheet. You know, they're the pros, or a Bill Fuller, or whoever it might be. So that's that. Okay, so let us move then to the next activity, which is, because Alan gets to give you homework. That's one of the fun things about this. You heard about writing letters or emails. Well, guess what? You're going to get to write a letter, except the letter this time will be a little different. If I can get some help with the handout, please. It's called Your Letters Count. Thanks. Okay. Your letter homework assignment from today is you're going to write a thank you letter to the representative and the alleged senator, thanking them for their time on Saturday, for meeting with you, and each one of you will do your own. And basically, you can read this here, but you're going to follow the script. And be sure, as you heard representatives say, that it has your name, your address, your zip code, your email, and your telephone number. All of that information, if they want to get back to you, and particularly in the future, if it's a constituent, they're going to look at the zip code and they're going to, oh yeah, Sonia's one of mine. For sure, I'm going to pay a little more attention to yours than maybe I will to Alan's because he's 2 districts over. I'll look at his, but you're a voter of mine, I'm going to take care of you first. As we said, yes, that's legal, that's fine. I'm more accountable to you or you're more accountable to me than somebody else. So that's fine, all right? So, dear Senator or Representative, even if you've gotten to know them over time on a first name basis, this is a formal letter for the record. It's always use their formal title, okay? Again, and again, right in here I say don't use form letters. You can type it, you can send it by email, but it's got to be your letter. Why are you writing? And the bill number, author, and title. Thank you for meeting us to talk about HB 105, blah, 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 blah. That's boilerplate. To meet with us to talk about the Colby Act and blah, 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 what it does. And then remind them what you wanted, or in the case with the table over there, where she agreed to be a co-sponsor. Thank you for agreeing to co-sponsor. By the way, that happened in the meeting voluntarily with a little prompting apparently yesterday. Okay, in here, if you want to put a statistic in or not, but no threats. In this case, you're thanking them for their time and attention, and anything we can do further to assist you on this. And you're going to say, are there disability issues? Please feel free to contact us. There were a couple of you who said you're going to do something to get back to them. Please be sure, and it doesn't have to be in this letter, but if you're going to do that, document it and do it and get it to them so they know you followed through. All right? Be sure you send copies to, Linda, do you want the copies of their letters? Who do they send the homework? Okay.
I would like to be
Yeah,
CC'd on
so
the.
she can give you credit for doing your homework. So you will write one to Representative Clark. You will write one to Senator Orr, DBA James Tucker. And you will also, I would like you to, and I don't know if we have the address, and if we need to get them, we can get it for you, but I would like you to write a thank you letter to Bill Fuller for his sharing his expertise yesterday in terms of sort of the nitty-gritty, which I think was helpful also in terms of today and going forward. So you have 3 letters to do. I'm a realist, I'm pragmatic, it's been a long weekend. I would say if you could get them done no later than Thursday or Friday of next week. Again, in the real world, I'd say within 3 days, but things are hectic right now. Just, again, it doesn't have to be a dissertation, but it's a thank you, a reminder, you know, bing, 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 bing. Look forward to working with you. Anything, please contact. And again, as we say, return address, email, phone number. Even if you're using old-fashioned mail, they throw away envelopes, all right? And somebody asked yesterday about stalking. Right again. I suggest wait at least 3 or 4 weeks. In your tight session, maybe it's a week. But there is nothing wrong with following through once you've started to build the relationship, okay? And get other people to write, even if they weren't part of this in the future. Letters count, votes count, and let me give you some numbers, and I don't know if Bill would agree with this, and mine are better from the federal level, but I think it's clear, and I hope you realize, I hate this column, that most people not only, or a lot of people don't vote, most people don't say anything. And again, Representative Clark was beautiful. There's 1,000 bills. I don't know what most of them are. I expect you, I need you as my voters to tell me. I only slipped her $10 to tell you that. No, but I'm serious. That's coming from a legislator. She can't know it all. There's no way. And she's on certain committees. Those bills are more important to her in terms of the work she does every day in session. So she was elegant in saying, please come to me. My constituents need to tell me what's important to them. She didn't say what I said yesterday. Otherwise, how does she know? And if you don't tell her, she's not going to know. And it's not because she doesn't care. She's got an agenda. Okay? So let her know. Let them know what's on your mind. And you never know where it's going to take you. And follow up. And follow up, and she alluded to that. And she also talked about the relationship. Start it early, build it, get there. You'll be amazed what can happen as you start to get to know these people and they get to know you, bless you, and that life can be good. And what I will tell you from the federal side, because people don't engage, I mean, I didn't want to ask her, but I'd love to ask her, or somebody could in the future. So in a typical year, how many constituent individuals do you hear from? Okay? And we know that she represents, based on the statistics, about 45,000 people. Anybody want to guess how many people of those 45,000 touch base with her in the course of 1 year? Speculate? What do you think?
10%? 50? 200.
Somebody said 10%. I think not. That would be 4,500. I would say somewhere between 500 and 1,000, maybe. Maybe. So think about you and your friends and colleagues in a district, and you've got 25, maybe 50 allies. They don't all have to be people with disabilities. They can be friends, neighbors, co-workers, associates, people in your church or place of worship. Okay, they all vote, they count. Think about this, how big your circle is, for them to write a letter. And guess what? The numbers multiply, because they know for everybody who writes, there's at least so many more who probably have the same issue that didn't know to write, didn't take the time to write. And as you heard her say, the paid lobbyists do their job. When you do yours, they know it's because you care, not because somebody's slipping you, $1,000 a day to go be a lobbyist or whatever lobbyists get paid, okay? So the power of your voice and your vote is huge. At the federal level, and this is based on congressional offices that I've worked with over a long time, the translation is the following. For every person who writes to their congressional House representative, the translation is there's at least 50 other people in that congressional district. So one letter is 50. 50 is 2,500 votes. You got it? They multiply, they do that. In the Senate, it's 1 to 100 because the Senate districts are larger. Okay? So if statewide, you get to your US Senator and you get 1,000 letters, that's a landslide. And people say, well, 1,000 is not a big number. It's a big number when you know how many people do nothing. And then all they do later on is grouse. Well, how come they didn't vote for that? Okay, and I'm going to give you an example, because I've lived too many of these. When I was at United Cerebral Palsy, DC, we had a lot of bills to do with Medicaid. And at that point, James may remember a name, Henry Waxman, who was Mr. Medicaid, and he's from California. And some of us had developed a very good relationship with him, but I didn't live in California. I didn't vote for him, okay? But his constituents did. And there was a major bill on the agenda, and we sent out all our action alerts, and the session was over, and that particular bill didn't pass. And I get a phone call the following week, because we did a summary to all the folks around the country, and the person was the exec of the big chapter in Los Angeles, which is where Mr. Waxman's home district is. And he called me, and he said, so why didn't this bill pass? I said, well, there's a lot of different reasons, Ron, but can I ask you a question? Sure. How many meetings did you and your board have with Representative Waxman when he was home on weekends or breaks or whatever? Well, we didn't do that. That's what we pay you hired guns in Washington to do. That's a direct quote, okay, from a UCP affiliate in a big city that Alan Bergman was supposed to take care of all of his constituents' lobbying. And I had to say to him what I've said to you. Ron, I know him and I know his staff and I have a good relationship. I don't vote for him. I live in Maryland. I vote for the 2 senators and my congressional, and he just sort of like was dumbfounded because he had this notion if you're a paid lobbyist, you have control of the world. You really don't. And again, that's even true when you're up against the 500 or whatever the number is that we heard from Bill and James. They're one vote. And their constituents may not all vote that way, but they're around the state. I mean, if they represent school board associations, there's lots of them. I don't know that they're all in lockstep with the majority position on a bill. When we're together, the power is huge. When we're a coalition, when we're talking over here a little bit, cross disability, it's unreal. That's what it took to get the ADA. We had to get the DD world, the mental health world, the visual disability world, the hearing disability world, everybody together and saying, this is a bill for everybody. It doesn't have categorical kind of stuff. And there were some attempts to exclude people. I won't get into it now. And we had to make sure that didn't happen because guess what? Certain groups were prepared to sell out others as long as their group got taken care of. And fortunately, we had agents on Capitol Hill and some officers who said, you guys need to know that people from that association were willing to sell out people with severe intellectual disabilities in order to make sure that their group was protected. At the end of the day, thank you. I hope you've heard the term Justin Dart and the hero that he was. We call him the Disability Gandhi, no longer with us. Justin made it clear in organization meetings every week in the church. Everybody's in or nobody's in. Everybody's in or nobody's in. And if you read the Americans with Disabilities Act, there are no exclusions or exceptions. Disability is broadly defined functionally, and if you have one, you are protected. But just know, there were attempts in the coalition for one group to be able to say, we got you protected, and we wouldn't say that we got them shafted. That also happened. We talked about the ABLE Act. The ABLE Act never had a 26-year-old age limit on it. I'm not going to name the names, but I know what happened. And some neophytes cut a deal with certain members of Congress and sold out a lot of our friends and colleagues whose disability occurs at 26 and 1 day, up to now we're trying to get it to 46 and whatever, because they didn't know any better and they thought, oh, well, my constituents are taken care of now. And they were in the right office at the right time, and before we knew it, boom, 26 was the cutoff. Okay, so coalition work on certain things is absolutely critical, and there was talk about that at this table. Okay, so your homework, you have either 2 or 3 letters to write, 1 to the representative, 1 to the senator. If you met with both of them, you get each of them, and 1 to Mr. Fuller, and you've got about a week to do those. And I want to give you a sample letter that was written about a bill. I don't generally do this. This is one of the most powerful letters that Alan has ever read. And I've redacted it so you don't know where it's from or whatever. This is a grandmother writing about early intervention in a state that is not one of the most progressive or most wealthy. Okay? And I want you to wait till you all get it, and then I want to tell you what happened to this letter. And again, no guarantees that this will happen to any of you, whether state or federal. This was state, but it could. Okay? So, early intervention was being discussed in the state legislature, tight budgets, okay? And this was quite a few years ago, okay? All right? She talks about her grandson, okay? She talks about her future. And we consider present economic issues, but it's dire we consider future monetary issues. Babies who receive rehab services now will not be a burden to federal and state economies in the future. Even Senator Orr might want to pay attention to that sentence. Seriously. Add an additional 2.1 to early intervention in the rehab services budget. The future of these babies depends on you. Okay? Thank you. From a very concerned and grateful grandmother, and she had a photo of the grandchild. This is a powerful letter, but let me tell you what happened. The senator she wrote it to was so moved. He read this on the floor of the state Senate, held it up with the photograph, and because of that, I think more than anything else, not only did the appropriation pass, it passed unanimously in a tight budget. I'm not telling you this will happen to you all the time, but it could, because this is power. She didn't waste a word in here, and she was in a partners class that I did in that state that year or the year before it. So I share this with you. Your story's different, but she covered a lot of ground. And again, the main paragraph is the middle one, which is what personally this means to her. As you do your thank you letters, as you do future letters, and then I'll share a different one with you at the federal level, because I never know where this, and some of this stuff could end up in letters to the editor in your newspaper. We'll talk about that in a minute. Because once it's in their office, I have no way to tell you. At the federal level, this was in Minnesota. We do a weekend like this with the congressional delegation. And it was around some Medicaid cuts that were going on probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And some things that were going to be changed. And a couple of the folks wrote letters, and one mom who had a kid who was pretty medically complex, living at home and getting in-home nursing and other kinds of stuff, wrote her letter, short and sweet, with a photo, sent it on like a bunch of other people. Her senator at the time, he's no longer there, Al Franken, I think you may know that name, okay? His staff, and the staff who read it first, was so moved, and every week they do this in Washington, just so you know, they go over the mail, the statistics with their bosses, and they share a letter or two if there are any that are compelling. Her letter was so compelling that Senator Frankel, on the day that they were discussing that Medicaid bill on the Senate floor, asked for permission, got up, read the letter, showed the picture of the family, and the place got totally quiet because he made it real for all of his colleagues, many of whom perhaps hadn't had a real story. They were looking at numbers and statistics and all of that. So I cannot guarantee to any of you this will ever happen, but I want to share with you that once you put it out there, it could take on a life and be very, very significant. So this letter is, I won't say it's the best I've ever seen. It's one of the best because I don't like to do this often, but I think it's a sample worth sharing to see how much she said in a very short space. I mean, I don't think she wasted a word. I wanted to go back to her and say, so do you really have a master's in English or something? But I share that one with you as well in terms of that homework assignment. Next, the media. Don't ever underestimate the media. They can be wonderful allies, absolutely wonderful allies. Whoops. Okay. Because they can help. Yes, please.
With the onset of internet and emails versus a handwritten letter to mail, snail mail, which one's best effective?
Well, I would say today, and you heard it from, I would say typically email is fine. If you're going to send a handwritten letter, make sure your penmanship is legible, and if not, type it, and that's fine. But I think today, email is the preferred, and like I say, you can attach a photo or something else to it. And they'll know it's personal when they read it, as opposed to a form letter. And again, when it's a form letter, they know there's a campaign, but they know you haven't made a big investment in it. I mean, you can if somebody sends you a form letter, you put your email on it, go bing, bing, and in 2 minutes you've done it. They know the difference between that and a letter like this one. She took more than 2 minutes to write this letter and think it through. Okay, again, Abraham Lincoln, public sentiment is everything. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. Not a bad quote. Build capacity in your community through using the media. Whether it's and again, local newspapers may be more powerful than the big city newspapers. Don't underestimate them. I just moved, but I lived in Northbrook and now in Vernon Hills. We have what's called the Weekly Gazette. In every one of those newspapers, there's at least 2 to 3 human interest stories tied to a local cause, or somebody writing about a piece of legislation, or a member of the delegation who did something or they want to do something. The local newspapers thrive on that stuff, and I guarantee you, your state senator and state rep make sure that they read the local newspaper to get a pulse. So build the pulse this way. This is just some helpful hints, whether you're doing a letter to the editor or you're asking to be interviewed, the same local radio, TV, that kind of stuff. They're always looking for this kind of stuff. And you've got your video already, but all of our issues are compelling to the general public. And even if 1 out of 100 of the readers of the paper pick it up and say, ooh, that's important, and they decide to write a letter or make a phone call, guess what? The numbers keep growing of the voters. So it's just another strategy, and the nice part about all of these, you don't ever have to go to the Capitol in Montgomery. This is all local hometown stuff to do. So that's your helpful hint on the media, and this has collapsed from lots of different places over time. Okay, I get to give you another piece of homework, and I've checked to make sure I can do this. I mentioned yesterday that ADAP is holding a webinar on the statewide transition plan for the Medicaid home and community-based waiver settings rule. And you're going to get this, by the way. It will be sent out to you. But it's, mark your calendars, this Tuesday, March 15th at 5:30 p.m. And I don't think they set it up because they knew I was going to cover this yesterday, but the timing is too good to pass this up. So, some of you are in the system, some of you are not. You've got a flavor, though. This settings rule is all about integration. And again, what I'd suggest you do is review the slides from 140. I went through it to mark it up for you. Through 149. So it's not a lot of slides. This is all the CMS rules about integrated settings and choice and autonomy and the person-centered plan that this state is to be in compliance, as all other states, basically next March. That's the final deadline. This plan is to say how they're going to get there, and I already know from prior conversations with ADAP that they have already filed a voluminous report about all the facility assessments that have been done to date that leave many questions about real integration, and I'll leave that at that. This is an opportunity for you to now be doing advocacy with the state agency that has to submit this plan to the federal government for approval. So all of you, and tell your friends to watch this too, it's wide open. It's going to be on the 15th, not due till the 28th. Linda said she'll probably deal with this, follow up with you on one of your Wednesday night sessions. Every one of you can write comments. It doesn't have to be on the whole thing, because basically the message you want is you want the Medicaid adult waiver services, be they self-directed or not, to assure quality outcomes based on informed choice, where people have full access in the community to everything that the rest of us do. You'll make it more specific when that. The more they hear, they're going to have to pay attention to this. They can't just throw them in the trash can and say, well, we're going to send in what we send. You'll learn what's in the current plan, what's going on from ADAP's perspective. They've spent a lot of energy on this over the last several years, I can assure you. So I asked, could I give you that as an additional homework? And the answer was yes. So that's your other homework. Attend the webinar. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, I'm going to email.
You're on.
I'm going to email out the information,
This.
that information
This
that
thing.
Alan is holding. I'll email it out to all of you. So look for an email from me sometime in the next 24, 36 hours. Nancy Anderson, that's who it's going to come
I'm
from.
sorry, yeah. Nancy will be sending this out. I'm already on the ADAP listserv and have been for a long time, so I got it the other day, and it was like, oh, okay, I'll do a plug for this. But the more I thought about it, this becomes part of your action plan from this weekend, where you can apply some of what you've learned into submitting comments to the state government about what they need to do to be sure the transition plan gets the kind of life outcomes we want and not more of the same stuff with Band-Aids on it, okay? So it's a great opportunity, and you'll get lots of very good coaching. I don't have any doubt about that. So look for the notice from Nancy, but you can put it in your calendar because it is going to happen. Okay. Let me see, pull up my other stuff here, get my agenda back out,
Question, Mr. Allen.
and we're at, 2:15. Wow. Yes, sir.
I just had a quick comment. I don't know if this is, I wish we would have thought about this earlier, but I know in a lot of these type of formats, you can submit your thoughts and questions ahead of time to the host, who's ever hosting the event, but it would be nice for us as a coalition to submit something representing PIPA as a group. It's more powerful that way, but I don't know. Because a lot of times you get on those calls and you're throwing in your comments and chats and they're coming at you and who knows what's going to happen to them. But just a thought, but I don't even know how we could do that by Tuesday.
Well, you don't have to do that by Tuesday. Tuesday is your informational session. And if you have questions, just write them down and send them on in. What you're going to have is almost 2 weeks after that session, and you do have Wednesday evening stuff with Linda, that you could be discussing this, and she's going to do that with you, to at least maybe come up with a consensus. But I still want to be sure, even if it's a PIPA thing, that each of you do your own with your own individual perspective on this to make it come alive. And it also adds to the numbers, because they have to report this to the feds. How many comments did they get, and how are they responding to the comments, just like the feds have to do now. Yeah, you got almost 2 weeks to put it together. And again, it doesn't have to be a dissertation. Okay? Good. All right. With that, I think you heard that stories are important. Before I do my final sign-off, I'll hold on to this one for a minute, Daryl. I had mentioned to a couple of people, I want to share a story, a couple of pieces, about my stepdaughter, Mindy. I mentioned Dina yesterday and the transition stuff that happened. Mindy turned 50 years old last fall. She has a condition called Rett syndrome. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but if you go read the literature, it doesn't say one good thing about people who have it, and it's mostly women. And here's the kicker. Mindy was born typical baby, no problems, no prenatal issues whatsoever, and somewhere around 8 to 9 months, her development froze. Now we know it was a genetic mutation. She's had the test and all of that. They didn't know what it was then, and it's a good thing I wasn't married to Jan at the time, because I'm going to tell you what the lead developmental pediatrician told her when Mindy was about 4 years old, in Chicago, from the medical school, etc. They brought her in, you know, because they were looking for a diagnosis. They wanted an answer. What's going on? And he admitted, I don't know, but she is so damaged that there's no hope for her future. Okay? Those are the words. I wasn't there, but Jan wouldn't lie to me about that. And do you know what they do with children like this or babies like this in China? And she said, no. This is real. This is the lead developmental pediatrician in Chicago 45 years ago. And he said, they take them up to the top of the mountain and they leave them there for the gods. Okay, that was bad enough. We don't have any mountains here, but you can see out the window we have Lake Michigan. He basically said, go throw your kid in Lake Michigan and let her drown and die. Nice physician. Why? Because docs only want to fix people, and he didn't have a clue how to fix her, so throw her away. They didn't do that, but a psychologist a couple of years later said, you better place her out of home because she's going to destroy your family and your other 2 kids. So when I met Mindy, she was in a residential school, and I met her, and we went to dinner, and I watched and observed and said, yeah, she's learned how to play the role real well. She's scamming everybody because she was labeled, pardon the old words, profoundly mentally retarded, nonverbal, spasticity, some ambulation issues, and on and on. She had had some seizures early. So her laundry list was pretty ugly, okay? And spent a little time, and I said, okay, we're getting her out. What? Yeah. So we got her out into what was called a host home, if some of you know what that is, like adult foster care. And we got her to go to school when she was 16 years old. And 20 to 21, she walked across the stage and got her certificate of completion. Yeah, with cap and gown. It was mind-boggling to her mother. I don't remember if her biological father showed up or not. He's kind of not a major player. Anyhow, so that was step 1. Then we've been down the road of a couple of different things, and I'll short circuit it. And eventually we got her into a meaningful community day integrated stuff, where she was going swimming and going out shopping and doing volunteer work and all kinds of interesting things for this person who wasn't supposed to be able to do anything and should have been drowned. And then we got her into that agency, same agency. They were doing a pilot project that I was in charge of in customized employment. So after the person, Nicole, had been there a while, I said, okay, I think it's Mindy's time. Jan, my wife, who's lovely, has followed my career and pretty much bought it, looked at me like, okay, wait a minute. Mindy's not going to go to work. She, again, was told she couldn't even do sheltered work, okay? So I said, well, I think Nicole's pretty good. Let's give it a shot. With fidelity, she went through the process. Here's the kicker. Besides her skills, part of Mindy's disability, ladies and gentlemen, 25-second auditory processing delay. So you say something to her, and this is not maladaptive behavior. Her wiring is such from the time it goes in till it gets processed up here and she can respond is a half a minute. Do you know what that's like in our nanosecond world today? We've had to train all the staff who work with her because, okay, Mindy, put your coat on. She doesn't do anything. Okay, we'll put the coat on for her. So learned helplessness. We've got that straightened out. So for Nicole, it was like, okay, Mindy can't work in a place where there's going to be other conversations, because whether it's a coworker or her job coach giving her some instruction, if somebody else says something across from her, it's lost. It's going to be garbled, okay? Guess what? Where'd Mindy end up getting a job? And she got one. Not on the top 20 list, working in a funeral home. It's quiet. There was no, okay, that's what customized employment does. And Nicole did a beautiful job of going to the employer. They'd never hired a person with a disability. I don't have time to walk you through the whole process. Help them see things they were paying people $50,000 a year to do before funerals because they had nobody else to do it, and basically customized a job for Mindy to put programs folding together with some stuff they did, labels on memorial, candles, other kinds of things essential to that funeral home's business practice so that we could free up. Nicole was great. Your grief counselors need to be doing grief counseling. Your salespeople need to be doing sales and whatever they're supposed to do, not this stuff. And she was smart. Minimum wage was still low. She said, but, you know, I've got somebody who can do this for $10 an hour and we'll help her in whatever. Unreal. Unreal. She started only 6 hours a week. Prior to pandemic, she was working 12. She was valued in the workplace. Jan, when she went the first time with me, we didn't go for 3 months, was just awestruck of Mindy's self-direction because she needed a lot of prompt cueing. She was motivated. Pushed the push plate on the door when she got out of the van, down the hall where the coat room was, little help from a personal assistant, navigated 3 other hallways to go to the office where she did her work, sat down and was ready to go to work. I think that's called motivation, okay? But she's profoundly whatever. Next chapter. 3 years ago, we found out about somebody who's an AUG communications specialist for women with Rett syndrome who happens to live 30 minutes, 20 minutes from our house. Collapsed that story. I said, we're going to try that. Jan said, okay, fine. So we go try it, and Mindy, it's the Dynavox Tobii eye gaze communication device. Carol and I were talking about that. Very expensive. And again, this is a young lady who has had no means of communication other than facial expression for 47 years. And Jan and I would go sit across the table, and this is at Susan's home, and it took a while to get Mindy used to this thing. And Susan only works with women with Rett syndrome internationally. There's gurus at this stuff. And eventually, Mindy is picking out the different icons up there and using her eyes. And it takes a while. You have to align the machine to her eyeballs and all that. But okay, that's what they do. And here's how great it got. I think you know I'm high expectation. 1 week after about a year of this, we couldn't make it. My wife was sick. So I called Susan, the teacher, and said, we're not going to be there today, and I know Mindy will be looking for us, so let her know we're not going to be there. So Mindy shows up with her support person, sits down, gets situated, but she's looking in the room, and we're not there. So Susan says the following. Mindy, Mom and Pops, I'm Pops because I'm the stepdad, I'm not Dad, are not going to be here today, period. Okay? Mindy says, again, she's got all these icons there, folks. I'm sorry. That's profound retardation. Then Susan says, yeah, Mom's not feeling well and is probably going to the doctor. Hang on. I'm sad. Can you even try to comprehend somebody who not only has content but affect for 47 years and no means to get it out? I can't. And the stuff that she's doing now, and she's not a Rhodes Scholar, but it so blew away her neurologist at Rush Medical Center, who specializes in Rett syndrome. When he heard about this, saw the results, he on his own, I didn't ask him to do this, wrote a letter, you'll appreciate this, counselor, to the State Developmental Disabilities Agency in Illinois. Said, I have known her for 25 years. I have been her neurologist. I am ordering you to remove the diagnosis of profound mental retardation permanently from her record. That is not fair. That is not who she is. Within 2 weeks, it was all taken out because he saw it and said, what have we done to her? And he was willing to say we by giving her this label. She's working, she's communicating, and fortunately she has Medicare from her biological father, what's called DAC. She gets a payment from his Social Security and Medicare card. We then went to the formal evaluation for the device, because you have to do that, done twice at a university, superb, whatever. They wrote up the report for Medicare, and I'm thinking, okay, we'll go through some rounds of this. The clinician who had all the right credentials told me she got one question, she answered it. 4 weeks later, the purchase authorization for $18,000 came through. Mindy now has her own device. Okay? I share that with you in terms of everything we talked about yesterday of raised expectations. And another phrase I want you to get rid of is people plateau. Have you plateaued? Linda, have you plateaued? That's an excuse and a cop-out for people with disabilities when we don't want to work with them anymore. Mindy, in their eyes, had plateaued when she was 3 years old. We don't know yet. And then here was the mind-boggler. I get a lot of the Rett syndrome stuff now. Last year in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a young lady with Rett syndrome who fortunately got AUG-COM when she was a baby, graduated, what's the top in your class? Is it magna cum laude? Whatever. Okay. And gave her graduation speech to the audience with her AUG-COM device and has a full scholarship to go to college. I'm not saying every woman with Rett syndrome has that, but then there's the part of me. What if Mindy had had this 25 years ago? And we can't go back because it wasn't around. But I share that with you in terms of don't let anybody ever tell you somebody has plateaued or reached their limit or maximized their potential. That's all clinical BS for copping out on figuring out what's the strategy to go to the next step. Okay, to end, this is called Whose Job Is It? And you'll get a copy. This is a story about 4 people named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. The moral of Partners this weekend in your journey is, I don't believe any of you started out being a nobody. I think you didn't start out being an anybody, but when you are going to graduate, you are going to be a somebody. And the somebodies together are everybody with your peers and friends to become the Army in Alabama for real systems change. Thank you. God bless.